kill, they probably will engage without frontiers or without tears.
There were always times when we saw other people who could do certain things better than we could or than I could, but you learn to find that if you have your own voice, it actually doesn't matter. As long as you've got your path and you do the best you can. Defines what is or what is not. One dot, two dot.
My name is Bill Wlitzka, welcoming you to the story of Peter Gabriel, and I'm just thinking, Peter, are you ready to squeeze in 3 decades into 1 hour here?
Of course.
Are you?
It sounds a little painful, but I'm sure it can be done.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the big thread for me, anyway, throughout your career is that it doesn't matter what album it was, what single it was, and you can even talk about the new record this way, is that it never sounds like anything else out on the charts. Well, you're not supposed to have hits when you're approaching things that way, and you have had a career full of them.
Yeah, no, I've been lucky, I think, and I think there's some familiar elements, like, you know, there's a soul reference from time to time, or like on this record, there's a blues reference, but often I'll try and create pictures that are a little unfamiliar and with some surprises, so you don't know exactly where you're going, and it's from start to finish, there's a bit of a journey. Like a painter who's got a palette in front of him, and he takes a bit of blue and a bit of red, a bit of white, and mixes them together, that I might take a bit of breath, a bit of something being, some metal object being hit, and then the resonance of a piano note, and mix them all together in the computer, and then use that as a new instrument, if you like.
Peter Gabriel was born February 13, 1950 in London, England. While attending Surrey, England's Charterhouse Private School, he formed a band called the Garden Wall with schoolmate Tony Banks in 1965.
There was a piano in the dining room of you know, the place where we lived, and Peter and I, as Peter Gabriel, used to just sort of play songs, Otis Redding songs mainly, most of our free time.
By 1967, the two classmates would find themselves in a new band, settling on the name Genesis. Eventual additions included Phil Collins on drums, Mike Rutherford on bass, and guitarist Steve Hackett. Genesis would soon carve a niche for themselves as one of the era's most progressive bands with complicated arrangements and sophistication never before heard on the pop charts.
We were influenced really by the Beatles and all that, I suppose, as much as anything else, but we took a little bit more maybe from the European classical music as well. I think we just took it from anywhere we could find it, really. I think a lot of our early influence, we came from sort of things like hymns even, you know?
It's a neat position to look back now, in that the way Genesis can be described, as some people have described it as, you know, music's best, foremost progressive rock band. At the time, I'm thinking you can't approach starting a band with that kind of vision.
No, you just, well, we were a little different, because most bands started off as a bunch of players. We started off as a bunch of songwriters, and I think that's one of the reasons that some of us are still around, really, because it was about the writing first, more than the playing and the sound, and although those are really important. So that way, I think you don't think about it where you're going to go. I mean, you want to do really well, you want to be the biggest, greatest, best, and break all sorts of musical barriers. But, you know, realities also set in, you know, and I think there were always times when we saw other people who could do certain things better than we could or than I could, but you learn to find that if you have your own voice, it actually doesn't matter, as long as you've got your path and you do the best you can.
And I may join you on your hearts now.
It was around the release of their third disc, 1971's Nursery Crime, that Peter Gabriel would take his band to new levels of theatricality. Peter began experimenting with masks, makeup, and other elements that would make their multimedia live shows legendary.
I think part of it is just commitment, is just being prepared to push yourself out there, and because it's, and naturally I think you get nervous when you're standing in front of a group of other people, and either you go for it or you hold back, and sometimes you can really feel it in waves, you know, going through the audience. And when you're boring them and they're not interested, you know, the wave shrinks back towards you. In a way, it's a part of our therapy, is that we find other ways to express ourselves and get paid for it at the same time.
1974's The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway would be Peter's seventh and final album with Genesis. As a year after its release, he announced his departure from the band, in which he helped put on the map.
I think there were a whole variety of reasons, really. I think personally I didn't like what I felt I was becoming in that role. And I did feel that the thing itself, because of its success, was becoming a little more conservative. You know, now if I want to do something which appears stupid or unnecessarily dangerous or risky to the other people I work with, I'm entitled to do it because it's fundamentally my thing which I'm putting at risk. Whereas in a band, in a sort of democratic setup, which we were, it was other people's livelihoods that I was f***ing up.
As the years sort of ticked by, up until the Lamb album when he left, it was slowly changing, and songs were much more by one or two or three people. And in fact, if we'd actually put who wrote what, when Pete actually left, there wouldn't have been such sort of cries of, well, that's it for them, you know, as there were. Because they'd have seen that a lot of favourite songs were written by, or at least had nothing to do with Pete.
Genesis was a collective of songwriters with far too much material, really.
Those very first few seconds, Peter says, "I'm leaving." Was there a sense at all of, uh-oh?
Well, if you ask different people in the band, and I mean, for example, Mike and Tony were probably more disappointed and worried because they saw Genesis as a group of composers. But us being young and sort of, you know, Spinal Tap, said, no, you're either with us or you leave. And he said, well, all right, then I've left. So my first reaction was, right, well, we're a four-piece now. The vocals, we'll play without a vocalist, you know. That was my first reaction. And they said, be quiet. Of course we need a singer. You know, and I said, you know, I felt like the guy, no, instrumental, they can hear what we're doing, you know.
Without a lead vocalist, the remaining Genesis members elected their drummer, Phil Collins, to take over vocal duties, only after a number of auditions were held with various singers.
I really didn't want to do it, but I do wake up some days and think, I'm a drummer, why can't I just play the drums? Why can't somebody else be out there talking to the audience and, you know, and worrying about his voice and all this kind of thing? But when Peter left, we reviewed maybe half a dozen guys and still nobody was there. And it was suggested, well, why don't you do it? And it was really not something that I was that happy about because I was a drummer and I didn't want to come out and be anything else, but I did it. And the first gig was in London, Ontario.
Peter Gabriel's solo career was launched in 1977 with the release of what would be the first of 3 self-titled albums. Peter Gabriel 1 was produced by veteran rock producer Bob Ezrin.
Time stood still. Eagle flew out of the night. He was something to observe.
With your first solo in '77, there was one reviewer that said it sounded like a musician unleashed.
Yeah, in some ways I was just trying to do a lot of different things that weren't Genesis, so I was trying to stay away from that territory. And, you know, and I worked with Canada's very own Bob Ezrin, and, you know, and Bob's a very musical guy too, so he helped bring things together. But at the time, I was just trying to flex my muscles as a songwriter, and having come out of a band, it's a little like leaving home, you know, you suddenly, there's a whole way of doing things that is gone, and you're suddenly out on your own and having to redo things and find new ways to connect with people.
Even with a built-in fan base and adding to it by picking up new fans, Peter still wasn't satisfied. Still to come on the story of Peter Gabriel, the desire to bring world music to the world.
Someone, regardless of where they're born, of what color their skin is, of what language they speak. They should, if they have a talent and something to say, have a chance to get heard. And currently, media is very racist.
Climbing up on Salisbury Hill, I could see the city light. Wind was blowing, time stood still. Eagle flew out of the night. He was something to observe. Came in close, I heard a voice, standing, stretching every nerve.
After leaving Genesis, Peter Gabriel wasted no time in embarking on a solo career. 3 self-titled albums would be released between 1977 and 1980.
It's a knockout. If looks could kill, they probably will engage without frontiers or without tears.
No longer feeling constrained by the limitations within a band situation, Peter brilliantly illustrated why he had to fly on his own. Early reviews of his self-titled trilogy used words like cerebral, vibrant, experimental, and atmospheric. At that point in his career, he was referred to as a visionary.
Well, sometimes I'm ahead of the game, and I think that's partly, from my dad, because he, in 1970, he was electrical engineer, inventor, and with an Italian design, this cable TV system, which was this fiber optic based, but they were talking about entertainment on demand, electronic democracy, sort of home shopping, all this stuff. But because it was right at the beginning of the 70s, it was all based around the rotary dial of the telephone, just to give you an idea how old it was. And so I watched him, campaign for things that weren't there yet, and have a hard time. But I think that's where my interest for what's coming developed.
I don't remember, I don't recall, I got no memories of anything at all.
Peter's 3rd solo disc in 1980 would be considered his artistic breakthrough, establishing him as one of rock's most ambitious and innovative artists.
I don't remember.
When people call you a visionary, does it make you squirm?
No, it's all right. It's a bit, it's like when people call rock artists genius or whatever, and you think that's a sort of pretty valuable currency, so I'm not sure I'd apply it. I think I connect to some things before they're normally or commonly adopted.
He would also become one of music's most political artists. Biko, a song about murdered anti-apartheid activist Stephen Biko, became one of the biggest protest anthems of the 80s.
Say it! Say your name! Oh, Biko, Biko, Biko.
Bantu Stephen Biko.
Biko's, it's definitely a political statement, more in a vein which I've been exploring to some extent in the past, and things which have social references. I've done on quite a few songs, although it's not always been obvious or people haven't picked up on it. I think a lot of people overvalue the effect of music, both in the 60s, the sort of hippie period, when there was all this grand flower power idea of instant revolution. There are grand ideas about social reform as a result of pop music, which I think are greatly exaggerated. But I think what you can do is perhaps trigger ideas and tap people's thinking into a given direction, and that's useful.
The outside world is black and white. We don't need one color dead. Oh, Biko, Biko, Biko.
Biko incorporated electronic and world beat elements years before those widespread musical movements would be commonplace.
Looking back on it, was there one event that sort of got you inspired by world music?
The first thing I remember actually was I had a problem with my radio, and I was flicking around shortwave looking for something to listen to. I came across some African music, but there was some harmonies and rhythms there that interested me a lot. And it was also around the time that drum machines first were invented. The very first one was a kit manufactured by a company called Paya. And so you had a capacity to start looking at other rhythms and see what you wanted to program rather than just work with what was available. So I think those were the first sort of moments when I was conscious of looking outside.
What is it about different sounds that really turn you on?
Well, I mean, initially I think it was grooves and voices, and then a whole lot else besides. It just felt fresher than a lot of the stuff I heard coming out of the radio. So that was very attractive to me. And I think, like many people, like when you're meeting a whole lot of people from places that don't speak your language, that have very different culture, there's a certain anxiety when you first try and get together. But like animals sniffing around, we eventually find a way to connect, and then you start making noises, and suddenly, you know, you're a couple of human beings just trying to express yourselves. And it's a fantastic thing when you break that ice and when you find a way to connect.
And there isn't any divisions between people from different races or skin colors. We're just musicians.
Peter's interest in world music allowed him to establish WOMAD in the early 80s. The traveling festival of world of music, arts, and dance was designed to bring various world music and customs to a Western audience.
I remember a train journey coming back from London one night, and I was very excited by some of the things that I just heard, and thinking, how on earth can we get this music to a larger audience, and began trying to think of some sort of event where one might pull in rock and roll musicians that had an interest in world music and use that to bring in an audience and then expose them to music from many cultures. One of the things that depresses me is that a lot of people tend towards cynicism before enthusiasm, and I think particularly in this area, we need a lot of enthusiasm, because, you know, most of the people that I know that have been introduced to world music by chance or by friends, whatever it is, suddenly find things that they really didn't know about, didn't expect to like, and become really enthusiastic.
We all believe that it's going to have an sort of increasing role in the future, that the sort of shuttered blinkers of rock are going to be forced open if they don't open voluntarily anyway. And for me, the most interesting areas of music are those which incorporate some high-tech and some non-European influence.
We, in 1980, started this thing called WOMAD, which was a World of Music, Arts and Dance, and because we couldn't find music that we were getting excited about from all over the world. There were maybe 2 record stores in London, and it was harder still to find live shows. We started the festival, and that got us into Real World Records later on.
The Real World record label was launched in 1989, a joint venture between Peter, his WOMAD organization, and Virgin Records. The goal was to make world music available to consumers everywhere. To date, Real World has issued records from almost 100 artists from 48 countries.
And it wasn't about education, it was just about enthusiasm, really. I mean, there was a sort of evangelical sense in some areas, just to try and open it up to people and say that this doesn't have to be sort of folk music or cultural music. This is something that is very real today and not just to be kept in a museum. We had a lot of artists coming into these festivals that couldn't get record deals anywhere. They were making great music, so it was crazy not to do something. So really, that's how the record company began.
Regardless which country you're born on this planet, you should have an equal opportunity to get to an audience and get your music seen and heard.
Part of what I love about the experience of being with all these musicians from many countries is that you all the time learn more about yourself, learn more about how to be with someone else, and how to be with the people of the world.
I think we wanted to be facilitators, and the artists in many ways lead what the label does.
'Cause when you're falling, I can tell which way is down. And when you're screaming,
The natural evolution of Real World Records would be to provide musicians the opportunity to record in a unique environment. Real World Studios was built in 1987 near Bath, England. Peter devised what he described as the ultimate recording studio and video complex. High-tech and handmade was the concept. Real World Studios has been called the most extraordinary recording facility in the world. Clients have included Kylie Minogue, Placebo, James, Lorena McKinnon, and dozens of others.
We tried wherever possible to have space and light
And the theory being that for our sessions, but also for these musicians who are not so familiar with studios, that they should feel right inside the process and not just separated. Traditionally, you've had the studio here and the control room here, and there's a wall of glass in between, and you get these sort of 6 cold faces looking out at you, and you're sort of in there like an animal in a cage. And the way we try and have it is that if it's energetic music, anybody that's in the control room with the artist, you know, in the same space, has got to be dancing or playing percussion or somehow supporting it. Someone, regardless of where they're born, of what color their skin is, of what language they speak, they should, if they have talent and something to say, have a chance to get heard. And currently, media is very racist, and you know, you don't get that range of cultural mix.
Still to come on the story of Peter Gabriel.
You know, I always think that when you get on the music biz conveyor belt and you're doing album tour, album tour, album tour, it's like a dog eating its own tail. And, you know, eventually the diet gets a little boring and you need to do something else.
Peter Gabriel's solo career gained momentum with his 4th studio endeavor, 1982's Security. The album earned glowing reviews and went gold on the strength of the album's first single, Shock the Monkey. As Peter distanced himself from his old band Genesis, the media had tried to create a rivalry between Peter and his ex-bandmate, Genesis replacement vocalist Phil Collins. Phil had also started to see success as a solo artist in the early 80s.
With the split between the band, there was a certain amount of animosity.
No, because really, I guess I'd been in there from the word go, and we were school friends, and I guess there was a better level of understanding, less competitive. I don't see them a lot, but we get on fine whenever we do. So, you know, I've worked with Phil a little bit since then, and you know, seen Tony and Mike a little bit too. So, yeah, there's no bad feeling.
As much as people tried to create a feud between the two Genesis vocalists, Peter and Phil would deny a feud existed. In fact, Phil even guested on Peter's 1977 solo debut, playing drums on some tracks, and Peter returned the favor, contributing some vocals to Phil's Hello, I Must Be Going in 1982.
'Cause I've been talking to the people that you call your friends, and it seems to me there's a means to an end, they don't care anymore.
Other people were trying to create this rivalry.
Yeah, no, you always get that stuff winding up because it's a better story. I watched him sometimes, we'd be in dressing rooms, and you know, I'd be bashing away at the piano and he'd be thumping away, and we'd both, you know, be forging some of our own songs. And I was thinking at the time, well, we'll get I'm sure there'll be a day when we both have an outlet for this stuff. And he's a very natural musician. You know, I've got an enormous respect for his talent as a musician.
So I'm thinking to guest on his 82 record was almost a way to prove that, you know, listen, stop it, there is no rivalry going on.
Yeah, and he was always very generous with his sort of musical time, because you know, he loves to drum, and he would come and sit in and offer to, you know, do sessions or live stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's not really been a problem there.
Peter's 5th studio album, 1986's So, would become his commercial breakthrough, featuring the hit single Sledgehammer.
I wanna be the sledgehammer. Why don't you call my name?
Some have called the groundbreaking Sledgehammer video the best music video of all time. It would become Peter's first #1 single. The video involved over 100 hours of filming and would result in being MTV's most played video of all time.
The video of Sledgehammer, the sort of frivolous nature of it maybe tends to offset people's image of Peter Gabriel as a very serious man.
Oh, I'm very pleased about it. I mean, I've always appreciated humor and seen, you know, some humor in things that I do, but I think this is the first time that it's come through visually properly, so it pleases me.
So would feature 3 top 10 singles and would garner Peter his first Grammy Award.
For every job, so many men no one needs. Don't give up.
The follow-up to So would take 6 years and would begin the pattern of Peter's long spans between releases.
If you look at other forms, whether it's someone writing a book, someone may take 7 years to write a book, and someone else 7 days. And that's acceptable, that time difference. But in our music, which is so business-based, people start, you know, getting upset if you take more than 9 months to make a record. And I always think that when you get on the music biz conveyor belt and you're doing album tour, album tour, album tour, it's like a dog eating its own tail. And, you know, eventually the diet gets a little boring and you need to do something else for your own sanity, let alone what you're putting in. And, you know, as they say in the computer speak, garbage in, garbage out. So I try to do a few other things that interest me as well as that.
Don't say nothing. Keep your hands on the wheel. Don't turn around. This is for real.
1992's follow-up to So would prove to be worth the wait. Us would be considerably darker as Peter would be going through a divorce during the recording. The album would reach platinum sales and mark his 3rd decade as a hitmaker.
I'm digging in the dirt to find the places I got hurt.
You had success in the 70s, 80s, 90s. A lot of your contemporaries have been tied to a certain decade. You've always avoided that. And I'm wondering how.
I'm wondering too, yes. I think it's just by staying open, interested and curious, you know, and I'm very lucky in lots of ways because with the, one, I've got the tools of production in the sense that I have a studio, I have a freedom to, you know, open canvas. The whole sort of WOMAD real world thing brings in all sorts of musicians. It's like a train station with the world traveling through and so the stuff there to inspire me, I think that's a little different than when musicians tend to hide themselves away. And it's also, you know, it requires a certain amount of courage when you start trying to work with people from different cultures or different places other than your own. That's, I think, kept me on my toes.
Give me steam. I'm how you feel to make it real. Real as anything you've seen.
Still to come on the story of Peter Gabriel.
In cultures where death is part of life, they seem somehow more vital, more alive than a lot of our culture, which is just pretending that it doesn't get old and just attached to youth. So I feel more comfortable with that.
And the darkness still has work to do. The knotted cords untying, the heated and the holy, oh, they're sitting there on high, so secure with everything they're buying. In the blood of Eden lie the woman and the man.
Peter Gabriel has long concerned himself with improving the world through various endeavors in a number of charitable organizations and causes.
I'd rather live in a society where people are making some attempts to improve the world than one that couldn't give a damn. I just think people have a responsibility to do whatever they can and make their voice heard, because at a certain point, if the number of people gets large enough, then attention will be paid.
Peter would co-headline the first benefit tour for Amnesty International in 1986, along with Sting, U2, Bryan Adams, Bob Geldof, and others. The Conspiracy of Hope tour would commemorate the 25th anniversary of Amnesty. Amnesty International was established to bring awareness to the plight of political prisoners being held captive and tortured around the world and other human rights violations.
With all the atrocities of Hitler, there are more people in jail and more people being tortured
and executed now than there were in the whole of the Second World War. Now, that is an atrocity in itself, and very few of us are prepared to do anything. And yet the planet is shrinking. There is no doubt that we can affect things in other countries, yet most of us are choosing not to do that.
It was at an earlier press conference when Bono pointed out that the people that have suffered torture in the last 6 months is greater in number than those involved in the outrages against the Jewish people in Germany in the war. I have some German friends my age who were asking their parents how they could just sit back knowing that these things were going on. And I hope when my kids ask me that question in connection with the outrages and torture that's going on in the world now, that I'll be able to say that I did something on this tour, and I'm very proud to be here.
At the end of the concert, sometimes you'd meet people who've been in jail for 6 years or been tortured for many months on end, and they'd be there shaking your hand with tears in their eyes, and suddenly there was real sense of why we were doing it. Just in numbers, too, that Amnesty, the phones were being flooded, and they were hoping to get 25,000 people writing letters, postcards, to stop the torture and stop the imprisonment, and I think they have 60,000 plus. So in that way, it was definitely a success. And I think just in North America generally, a lot of people had no idea what Amnesty was, what it did, and I think they are really capable of doing for human rights what Live Aid did for hunger.
They were aiming for 25,000 new letter writers, because one of the most effective weapons that they have is just very simple. It's just people sending postcards to embarrass the governments and the jailers who were committing the torture and imprisoning people. And I think they've got 60,000, so that's way more. And I think on the money side too, they're doing well. So I think in all the targets, it's succeeding.
Peter would lend his time and attention to Amnesty once again. 2 years later, he would co-headline the Human Rights Now Amnesty benefit concerts. The same year, Peter also co-headlined the Nelson Mandela 70th birthday tribute concert at Wembley Stadium. The South African-born Nelson Mandela had actively pursued resistance in the ruling National Party's apartheid policies. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1964, accused of plotting to overthrow the government. He became a potent symbol of resistance as the anti-apartheid movement grew. He consistently refused to compromise his political position to obtain freedom.
We would like to welcome someone on stage that's been a great influence on our music and also on our politics. First time I ever went to a rock concert, this guy was on stage. He was singing then. He was a personal hero of mine, and he still is. And please welcome Mr. Peter Gabriel.
South Africa is the only country in the world which has racism enshrined in its constitution. It was a message from all of us, from all of you, from the sons and daughters of the South African government, but it's time for a change.
And I hope also that the kids of the South African government, that the young white South Africans will look and see what these musicians, who are popular there, are saying about their country, and that will help speed the process of change. I don't endorse violence, but what has gone on for so many years now is outrageous and should come to a stop.
Nelson Mandela would be released from jail 2 years later. He would plunge himself wholeheartedly into his life's work, striving to attain goals he had set out almost 40 years previous. The same year, at the same venue, another tribute concert for Nelson Mandela was held, this time to commemorate his freedom. Peter Gabriel would headline the 1990 Nelson Mandela tribute concert. In addition to performing benefit concerts, Peter has had a long track record of donating songs to benefit albums. He has contributed material to several collections for Amnesty International, 2 Greenpeace compilation records, the Princess Diana charity album, and Refuge, a Kosovo benefit disc. In 1993, Peter contributed to the Piece Together compilation record to benefit young people caught in Northern Ireland's political confrontations.
I think what I believe in is the power of people, that if there's enough people who shout loudly about something they really care about, that politicians have to take notice because their electoral future is dependent on us. Clearly there was this sense that you acted in one country and it had an effect in another.
You don't have to be afraid. There's nothing here today. Our princess, you might like it if you lower your defense. Kiss that front.
Get your Still to come, Peter on aging, death, and his brand new disc, Up.
I don't think I'm consciously, losing a lot of sleep thinking about dying, but it's on the table. Let's go.
One man at the window, one girl at the bar. Saw the look around.
I thought it was funny, your stock answer for when someone asks you, when is the album coming out? What do you say?
September.
You don't tell them the year, though.
No, well, that's what kept him quiet for a while. About 5 years, I think.
Seen you on the TV. I seen you on that show. You make the people crazy, and then you let them go.
Peter Gabriel's first pop record in 10 years is 2002's Up.
We care, and the hostile folk we keep apart till the red light says on air.
Wow, it's been 10 years since his last record, and I think that's a popular misconception. Well, you've been busy for 10 years.
Yeah, I've been busy. I think people just think you sit around on your ass, and so I do keep myself pretty occupied, and this has taken a long time, but I didn't have a producer on this, so there was no one really cracking a whip, and whenever I get bored with an idea, I'd move on to something else, and we ended up with 130 things that I was working on, so that was a little silly, but I sort of started properly in around 95, 96, and then, yeah, so I think with any album I know with its own archaeology department.
Some are referring to this as a comeback record.
Right. Every record I make is a comeback record. I've never been quick.
When everyone knows there's going to be a brand new Peter Gabriel record, they're going to think, is it going to be like Security? Is it going to be like Us? Is it going to be like So? It doesn't sound like anything like you've ever done.
Good. Well, it's very hard for me to judge. To me, it's a sort of continuation of songwriting and less sort of world focus, but I'm happy if you think it sounds fresh.
Do you think of that going in? I'm going to do something that I've never done before.
Yeah, I'd like for it to sound different in some ways, but the selection was a somewhat random process. I think people think you have a clear goal in mind, but the way I work is sort of throw a lot of mud on the wall and you sort of spiral inwards till you find where you're going. Most other people know where they're going and just go straight for it.
Are you happy with the end result most of the time?
Yeah, and it's a more interesting route.
I'm scared of swimming in the sea with dark shapes moving under me. Every fear I swallow makes me small. Inconsequential things occur. Alarms are triggered, memories stir. It's not the way it has to be.
There's a line in Signal to Noise, still something in my heart to find a way to make a start. This is a line that to me is a really good indication of something you talked about years ago, and that is you like to give the listener an escape hatch of positivity.
Yeah, there's some pretty bleak subject matter and about 5 songs dealing with death, but I think that in a way they're quite positive. And you know, our culture is youth dominated and we run away from death. And when you run away from something, you often find yourself going right back into it. And in other cultures where they accept death or they have initiations, which sort of include some death-like rituals, there's a presence of death in life, and somehow they're more alive. So I see that as a positive thing, and I think Signal to Noise is, in a sort of very English way of writing, saying the same sort of thing as Get Up, Stand Up. The whole dead person's market is something that people haven't really addressed so far. So I was just writing about things that interested me, and there were 4 or 5 that ended up about death in one way or another. But there's also some about the beginning of life too, so I think it was sort of being more connected to the beginning and end that got me fired up.
All the walls close in on me. Precious building, wave on wave, till the water breaks and outside I go.
Your own mortality.
I'm not going to die, so I sorted that one out because I didn't like the idea of it, you know.
When people are bringing it up, do you start thinking about it?
Occasionally, you know, it's, I mean, something that I'm aware of now, and I do say seriously now that at 52, I know people who have died now, whereas at 20, you know, there are very few, grandparents maybe, but now it's sort of more on the table. I lost a brother-in-law, a friend with a heart attack, someone else struggling with cancer, and so it's a real thing now. And I think, looking around, that in cultures where death is part of life, they seem somehow more vital, more alive than a lot of our culture, which is just pretending that it doesn't get old and just attached to youth. So I feel more comfortable with that and with myself. So I don't think I'm consciously, you know, losing a lot of sleep thinking about dying, but it's on the table.
The more you know, the show will score.
Showtime.
Hi, I'm Chris McDonald. We're here on the set of the Peter Gabriel new big hit he's got called The Barry Williams Show, and I play Barry Williams. We're gonna show you on the studio. Come on. Barry Williams Show. You know, Barry was a mentor to a lot of people, not unlike Jerry Springer. Barry was Jerry's biggest, you know, hero. And so I predate all that stuff, and basically what I do is I talk about the dysfunctional excess is all it took for my success. Lyric of the song. Come backstage. This is where all the freaks are. Okay, dancers. Say hello to my dancers.
Jerry.
So. Oh, Hollywood. Yeah, okay. This is her twin sister.
Hi, cutie. How are you?
Run a little backstage. Freak. Dad's upset. His daughter's selling sex. The dominatrix and her submissive. She was once a man.
It's partly a little fable about reality TV and you know, where that's going and what it does to people. And I know for myself, you know, you want to watch it sometimes, but it's a little like junk food. You have an appetite for it, but it doesn't make you feel very good at the end of it. I called up Sean Penn because I think he's a very good director, and for the song I wanted something that was quite dark, that had some guts to it, and I thought he would do that quite well, and some humor.
Off the bat, I was really flattered to get the call, and then because I think he's a great artist and somebody that's been an inspiration to me in a million ways for a long time.
Got the reputation of a surgeon, cause they cannot feel the cut. It looks so very simple, but it really isn't art.
Well, when I was looking for a name, I was trying to think of someone who would be suitable for TV, but I had no idea when I came up with the name Barry Williams that there already was someone that Americans would be familiar with the name Barry Williams.
When Peter wrote the song, he was searching for a name that would work well musically. And he had tried apparently several different names, and he happened to land on Barry Williams. And although he might have been aware of the Brady Bunch and was, I don't think he made the connection between Brady Bunch, Greg Brady, Barry Williams. So basically, he was just using a name that worked like a good lyric.
I really was ignorant of the real people attached, but probably, you know, any name that sounded as if it lived in TV land would probably have some real faces attached. I think this name had more well-known faces than I realized.
Playback. Numbers.
Got it? Got it. And Dolly.
We call the studio the hospital, making money from the sick. We let people be themselves, there is no other trick.
I know you're shy of certain words that people use to describe you.
Sexy? Not shy of that one.
Genius has come up, innovator. People do need words to describe you.
Brad Pitt lookalike. No, I don't know. You know, whatever comes up really is. I think people in the music business use the word genius a little too easily. I mean, I think, you know, I do my thing and I mix it up in a way that's different, but I don't think I'm Einstein.
Ladies and gentlemen, big hand for Mr. Peter Gabriel.